The most dangerous thing a company can own is not debt or competition or even failure. It is memory. Memory convinces executives that what worked before will work again. It tells audiences that what once made them feel safe will always be worth paying for. And for more than a century, no company has monetized memory more successfully than Disney. But by the late 2000s, that same strength quietly became a trap. $1 billion bet on the past that looked invincible on paper, felt comforting to consumers, and slowly hollowed out the future. Disney is not just a media company, it is a cultural infrastructure. Since its founding in 1923, it has shaped childhood itself, exporting American stories, values, and aesthetics across generations and borders. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937 proved animation could be a commercial art form. Disneyland in 1955 redefined themed entertainment as an emotional experience, not a carnival attraction. The Disney Renaissance of the late 1980s and 1990s turned animated films into global events, with The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, and Aladdin generating billions in box office revenue and merchandise sales while embedding themselves into collective memory. This wasn't accidental. Disney's original genius was vertical integration before the term became fashionable. A character was never just a character. It was a film, a soundtrack, a lunchbox, a television show, a theme park ride, and eventually a vacation destination. Mickey Mouse was not intellectual property. He was an economic engine. By the 1960s, Disney had built a self-reinforcing loop where storytelling fueled merchandise, merchandise funded expansion, and expansion deepened emotional attachment. That model scaled dramatically in the late 20th century. Under Michael Eisner, Disney became a corporate powerhouse, expanding into television networks, live-action film studios, cruise lines, and international theme parks. By the time Eisner left in 2005, Disney had transformed from a studio into a diversified entertainment conglomerate, but it was also showing signs of creative exhaustion. Animation had lost momentum, internal morale was fractured, and Pixar, once a partner, had become a rival. Bob Iger's arrival in 2005 marked a strategic reset. His insight was simple and devastatingly effective. If Disney's strength was emotional attachment, then the safest growth strategy was to buy emotional attachment rather than create it from scratch. In 2006, Disney acquired Pixar for $7.4 billion. In 2009, Marvel for $4 billion. In 2012, Lucasfilm for just over $4 billion. Each deal brought not just content libraries, but multi-generational fan bases already trained to care. The results were extraordinary. Between 2010 and 2019, Disney dominated the global box office with an efficiency unseen in modern entertainment. Marvel alone released 23 interconnected films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga, culminating in Avengers: Endgame in 2019, which grossed nearly $2.8 billion worldwide. Star Wars returned to theaters with The Force Awakens in 2015, crossing $2 billion globally. Animated remakes like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King each generated over $1 billion in box office revenue. By 2019, Disney held roughly one-third of the US box office. That same year, the company generated $69.6 billion in revenue, its highest ever, with theme parks and experiences contributing more than $26 billion. Disney was not just winning, it was setting the terms of the entire industry. But something subtle was changing beneath the surface. The very franchises driving Disney's success were increasingly backward-looking. The largest hits were not new stories, but reboots, sequels, and live-action recreations of films audiences had already loved decades earlier. The risk profile looked appealing to executives and investors. Familiar characters reduced uncertainty. Built-in audiences lowered marketing risk. Nostalgia converted directly into predictable cash flow. At the parks, the same logic applied. Prices rose aggressively as Disney leaned into its most devoted fans, confident that emotional loyalty would override price sensitivity. Between 2010 and 2020, the cost of a single-day ticket to Disneyland more than doubled. Hotels, merchandise, and food followed the same trajectory. Attendance remained strong, reinforcing the belief that Disney's brand could absorb almost any increase. Early warning signs were easy to dismiss because the numbers still worked. Critics noted franchise fatigue. Audience scores began to diverge from critic reviews. Solo, a Star Wars story, underperformed in 2018, becoming the first Star Wars theatrical release to lose money. Several live-action remakes earned massive revenue but muted cultural impact, fading quickly after release. Creative risk-taking narrowed, as internal incentives rewarded protection of existing IP over experimentation. Internally, Disney was becoming less a storytelling company and more an asset management firm. Greenlighting decisions increasingly revolved around brand safety, cross-platform synergy, and franchise continuity. Original mid-budget films, once the industry's backbone, quietly disappeared from the slate. The pipeline filled with content designed not to surprise, but to reassure. The culmination of this mindset arrived in 2019 with the launch of Disney+. To compete in the streaming wars, Disney needed volume, and volume meant mining its archives relentlessly. Legacy franchises became content factories, extended into series, spin-offs, and reimaginings. The same characters appeared everywhere, all the time. Scarcity, once a key driver of Disney's magic, was replaced by saturation. From the outside, it looked like total control. Disney owned the past, dominated the present, and appeared positioned to dictate the future. But beneath the dominance was a structural bet that nostalgia could function as an infinite resource, that audiences would not tire, that emotional memory could substitute for creative renewal, that the same stories could be told again and again without diminishing returns. This was the central decision that defined Disney's next decade, a choice to optimize for certainty instead of discovery, to monetize what people already loved rather than risk building what they might love next. The nostalgia machine was printing money, but it was also narrowing the company's imagination. And when external pressure finally arrived, Disney would discover that a business built on memory struggles when the future demands something new. The problem with building a company around certainty is that certainty collapses the moment conditions change. For Disney, those conditions shifted faster and more violently than its strategy allowed. What had once been a controlled system of release windows, theatrical dominance, and carefully rationed content was about to collide with streaming economics, technological disruption, and a consumer culture that no longer behaved the way nostalgia-trained executives expected. The first fatal decision was speed. In 2019, Disney launched Disney Plus as a defensive necessity, not a creative reinvention. Netflix had already crossed 150 million subscribers globally and was spending aggressively on original content. Disney's response was to pull its vast library from third-party platforms and use it as the foundation of its own service. The logic seemed airtight. No company in history had a deeper catalog of beloved franchises. If nostalgia could fill movie theaters, it could fill subscription queues. What was underestimated was how radically different streaming economics are from theatrical ones. A blockbuster film can fail creatively and still succeed financially through opening weekend momentum and global marketing. Streaming content does not enjoy that luxury. Its value is measured over time, in retention, engagement, and subscriber churn. A familiar title may drive signups, but it does not guarantee loyalty once the novelty fades. To keep subscribers paying monthly, Disney needed constant output. And constant output meant accelerating production across Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, and Disney Animation simultaneously. Budgets ballooned, creative oversight fractured. In 2021 alone, Marvel released 4 films and 5 Disney Plus series. Star Wars expanded into overlapping shows built around the same narrow timeline. Characters once treated as events became content inventory. This shift diluted what nostalgia depends on most: emotional scarcity. When everything is special, nothing is. Audience fatigue set in quietly but measurably. Box office performance began to soften. By 2023, multiple high-profile releases underperformed relative to their budgets. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, The Marvels, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny failed to meet internal expectations, with The Marvels becoming the lowest-grossing film in the MCU. These were not obscure experiments. They were flagship brands. At the same time, streaming losses mounted. Between fiscal years 2020 and 2023, Disney's direct-to-consumer division reported operating losses exceeding $11 billion. Subscriber growth slowed, then reversed. Content costs rose faster than revenue. The very franchises meant to stabilize the business were now driving its most expensive failures. Internally, pressure intensified. Leadership instability worsened strategic confusion. Bob Chapek, who succeeded Iger in 2020, inherited a company entering the pandemic at full speed. Theme parks shut down, film releases halted, revenue collapsed. While some cost-cutting measures were unavoidable, creative relationships frayed. Public disputes with talent damaged Disney's reputation as a stable creative home. Morale declined across divisions as decision-making centralized around short-term financial targets. The parks, long considered Disney's unbreakable profit engine, revealed their own fragility. Attendance recovered after COVID closures, but guest satisfaction declined as prices rose and perks disappeared. The shift toward aggressive monetization, once buffered by emotional goodwill, began to erode trust. Loyalty was being treated as a resource to be extracted rather than a relationship to be maintained. Meanwhile, competitors adapted faster. Netflix recalibrated its spending and leaned into global originals. Universal revitalized its theme parks with newer, riskier IP like the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and Super Nintendo World. Smaller studios embraced mid-budget films that Disney had abandoned, capturing cultural relevance without franchise dependency. The market diversified while Disney concentrated. By late 2022, the consequences became unavoidable. Bob Iger returned as CEO, publicly acknowledging that Disney had lost its creative focus. Cost reductions followed, including layoffs affecting thousands of employees. Content pipelines were slowed, franchises were paused. The company began to unwind the very strategy it had spent years accelerating. Financial markets responded with skepticism. Disney's stock price, which had peaked above $190 in early 2021, fell below $90 by late 2022. Activist investors questioned governance and capital allocation. The illusion of invulnerability had shattered. This was not a collapse in the traditional sense. Disney did not disappear. Its assets remained enormous. Its characters were still globally recognized, but something more subtle had broken. Cultural centrality. The sense that Disney defined childhood for a new generation rather than recycling it from the last. The ability to surprise instead of reassure. The deeper lesson extends far beyond Disney. Nostalgia is not innovation. It is a multiplier, not a generator. When paired with new ideas, it amplifies impact. When used alone, it cannibalizes the future to preserve the past. Disney's billion-dollar trap was not loving its history. It was confusing history with strategy. For decades, Disney taught the world how stories could scale into systems. In chasing certainty, it forgot why those stories mattered in the first place. They were risks once. They were unfamiliar once. They were not built to be safe. They were built to be new. And in an economy that rewards relevance over reverence, memory is only an advantage if it does not replace imagination.